All right. If you're deep in the trenches studying for your real estate exam, especially Course 3, you know exactly the feeling I'm talking about. It's that nagging suspicion that the questions aren't just testing your knowledge, they're actively playing word games with you.
You're staring at two answers that look almost identical, and you're just thinking, am I going crazy, or is this question literally designed to make me fail? It's so frustrating, but trust me, you're not going crazy, and you are definitely not alone.
Well, let me just give you the short answer. Yes, they are. But here's the really good news. Every single trap has a trigger, and every word game has a tell. So let's break down the cheat codes to spot them and outsmart them so you can walk into that exam feeling totally confident, not confused.
So let's kick things off with our very first trap, what I like to call the deceptive duos. These are those pairs of words that, they sound similar, they feel like they have the same kind of vibe, but in the eyes of the law, they do completely different jobs. And the classic example is acceptance versus acknowledgement.
The difference is actually way simpler than it seems. Think of it like this. Acceptance answers the single most important question, do we have a deal? This is the magic moment. It's the action that legally creates the contract. It's the I do of the agreement. Acknowledgement, on the other hand, just answers a simple question, did you get my message? It's just a confirmation like a read receipt on a text. It's part of the paper trail, not the deal itself.
So here's the pattern you need to look for on the exam. If a question asks what makes the contract binding or what step creates the deal, the answer you're looking for is acceptance. If the question is just asking about confirming you received something, a signed copy, a disclosure form, whatever, the answer is acknowledgement. Don't let the similar sounds fool you.
Okay, trap number 2 is all about learning to pick the technical, legally correct answer over the one that just kind of sounds nice or moral. I call it the paper trail rule, and it's a huge deal when it comes to a salesperson's duties. This is where so many people fall for answers that sound right but are legally wrong.
So here is the core rule you have to burn into your brain. When you're disclosing a material fact, you've got two jobs. First, you have to actually disclose it. But second, and this is the important one for the exam, you have to make your best effort to get a written acknowledgement that the buyer received it. That phrase, written acknowledgement, is everything.
So why is the course so strict about this? Well, this quote from the material says it all. Verbal disclosures are a lawsuit generator. A verbal conversation is basically worthless in a dispute. It's a he said, she said nightmare and opens up a huge amount of risk. The course wants you to understand that paper is protection.
So here's the exam pattern. If you get a question with options like tell them verbally or explain it clearly, competing against get it in writing or obtain written acknowledgement, just stop. The answer is always the one that creates a paper trail. Choose documentation every single time.
All right, let's tackle the boss level. This is the concept where most people really get tripped up. The biggest mistake you can make is treating all conditions as if they're the same because they're absolutely not. So, welcome to the world of conditions, waivers, and the one that causes all the headaches, the true condition precedent.
First off, what even is a waiver? Well, think of it as the buyer basically saying, hey, you know that safety net I put in the contract for myself? The one about getting financing or a good home inspection? I don't need it anymore. Let's make this deal firm. It's just them intentionally giving up a protection that was there for their own benefit.
This entire confusing topic really just comes down to one simple question. Who is in control? That's it. For a regular condition precedent, like being satisfied with an inspection, the buyer is in control. They decide if they're satisfied, and because they control it, they can choose to waive it. But a true condition precedent depends on a third party, like the city having to approve a zoning change. The buyer and seller have zero control over that.
And this leads us to what I call the you can't waive reality rule. If a deal depends on some outside event happening, you can't just waive it into existence. A buyer can't say, well, I waived the city's zoning approval. That makes no sense. If that third party doesn't give their okay, the deal is dead. You simply cannot waive a true condition precedent.
Okay, our last set of traps are all about the fine print. These are the kinds of questions that punish you for making assumptions, and they really test your attention to detail, especially when it comes to Tarion warranties and rural property access.
First up, Tarion. This is a classic exam trap using absolute words. If you see an answer choice that says all new homes in Ontario are covered by Tarion, that is the trap. The correct answer is that almost all are covered. But there are some really important exceptions. And you better believe the exam loves to test you on those exceptions. The two most common ones you'll see are owner-built homes, they're excluded, and homes that are built on top of a pre-existing foundation, which has its own special rule.
And the exam can get very, very specific. I want you to remember this number, 40%. It is pure exam fuel.
So what does that 40% even mean? Well, for one of those so-called new homes built on an old foundation to qualify for Tarion, more than 40% of the original foundation walls still has to be there. I know, it's a super specific detail, but that's exactly why it's on the exam. Now for the second fine print trap, rural access. In the city, you just assume there's a road to get to the property, right? But in rural areas, that assumption can be a massive, massive mistake. You have to verify legal access like your career depends on it.
The exam will often test you on the very specific scenario of having to cross crown land to get to a property. The key rule here is that just because people have been driving across it for decades doesn't mean it's legal. Past use is not enough. You need a formal legal easement, a right-of-way. The correct procedure is always to confirm legal access exists, not to rely on history.
Okay, we've broken down the 4 biggest traps. Now, let's put it all together into a master key, a rapid-fire cheat sheet to lock these concepts in before exam day.
Here are the codes. 1. Acceptance creates the deal, acknowledgement just confirms receipt. 2. Disclosures demand a paper trail, always get it in writing. 3. You can only waive a condition the buyer controls. 4. You cannot waive a condition a third party controls. 5. Tarion covers almost all, not all, and remember that 40% rule. And 6. For rural land, verify legal access. Past use is not good enough.
Remember, these aren't just trivia questions, they're tests of pure logic. When you learn to spot these patterns, you stop trying to memorize a million answers and you start learning how to actually beat the game itself. So, now that you know the traps, which one are you going to go back and review first?